She tried to help the company succeed, but the company president didn't appreciate her, so she quit, only to regret it later. On the first Monday of January, while most of Chicago was still digging itself out from a weekend snowstorm, Claire Bennett arrived at Meridian Dynamics before sunrise. The 22-story glass building looked almost black against the winter sky, every office dark except the security desk in the lobby and one narrow strip of light on the 17th floor. That strip belonged to Claire. She had been arriving before everyone else for so long that the night guard no longer asked why. He only nodded when she came through the revolving doors with her laptop bag, a paper cup of coffee, and a second pair of shoes tucked under her arm because the sidewalks were too icy for heels. Meridian was not a famous company. It made logistics software for hospitals, grocery distributors, factories, and regional trucking networks. But inside its corner offices, executives liked to speak as if they were one breakthrough away from changing the world. Claire had once believed that too. She had joined the company 9 years earlier as an analyst with no office, no title anyone respected, and no idea how to play corporate politics. What she did have was an unusual ability to see what was broken before everyone else admitted there was a problem. She could look at 3 messy spreadsheets, a sales forecast, and a customer complaint log, and somehow understand where the real damage would happen 6 months later. That talent had saved Meridian more than once. It had also made Claire useful in the most dangerous way possible, indispensable without being powerful. At 36, she was now Vice President of Operations Strategy. The title sounded impressive until a person looked at the organizational chart and realized she had responsibility for nearly everything that could go wrong, but authority over almost nothing that could stop it. When projects missed deadlines, people called Claire. When a customer threatened to leave, people called Claire. When engineering blamed sales, sales blamed product blamed finance, and finance blamed reality, Claire was the one asked to align stakeholders. She was very good at aligning stakeholders. She was not very good at taking credit. That morning, she was preparing a rescue plan for Meridian's most important account, Northstar Medical Supply. Northstar distributed essential medical equipment across 6 states and represented almost 18% of Meridian's annual revenue. 6 months earlier, Meridian had promised Northstar an artificial intelligence forecasting system that would reduce warehouse delays by 30%. The system was still unstable. The sales team had oversold features that did not exist. Engineering had quietly postponed critical fixes. The customer success team had stopped trusting internal deadlines. And Northstar's CEO had sent a message late Friday night saying that unless Meridian could demonstrate a credible recovery plan by Wednesday, the account would be reviewed for termination. No one had forwarded the message to Claire. She had learned about it from a project manager who called her in a panic at 11:42 p.m. By 6:50 Monday morning, Claire had read the contract, mapped every failed promise, spoken to 2 engineers in Europe, and created a 12-week recovery schedule. It was not pretty. It involved admitting to Northstar that Meridian had promised more than it could deliver. It also involved delaying a flashy product launch the president wanted to announce at the company's annual conference. Claire knew which part of the plan would cause trouble. At 8:55, she walked into the executive conference room carrying 10 printed copies of the recovery proposal. The president of Meridian Dynamics, Adrian Cole, was already at the head of the table. Adrian was 44, sharp-featured, charismatic, and famous inside the company for remembering numbers better than names. He had become president 3 years earlier after the founder retired. Under Adrian, Meridian had grown quickly. Revenue was up, headcount was up, press coverage was up. So were employee departures, customer complaints, and internal chaos, but those did not fit neatly into the stories told at investor dinners. Adrian believed in momentum. Claire believed momentum was only useful if the wheels stayed attached. Northstar can't wait 12 weeks, Adrian said after Claire finished explaining the situation. They can if we give them a plan they trust, Claire replied. They were promised the forecasting launch by February. They were promised something we can't safely deliver by February. Adrian leaned back in his chair, then find a way to deliver it. Claire had expected resistance. She had not expected indifference. Adrian, if we force the launch, it will fail in production. We'll create inventory errors in hospitals. This isn't a streaming app. Their warehouses move ventilators, surgical equipment, medication supplies. We need to stabilize the system before we scale it. Across the table, Evan Ross, Senior Vice President of Sales, glanced at his phone. Evan had been at Meridian for 4 years. He was polished, charming, and very skilled at appearing calm during disasters other people would have to fix. North Star was his account. He had personally approved the promises that caused the crisis. Adrian looked at him. Evan. Evan set his phone down. I think Claire's concerns are valid, but I also think we're being too conservative. North Star doesn't need perfection. They need confidence. If we show hesitation now, they'll smell weakness. Claire stared at him. The room fell quiet. We're not talking about hesitation, she said. We're talking about system reliability. Evan smiled slightly, and I'm talking about customer psychology. Claire almost laughed. It was the kind of phrase executives used when they wanted to avoid admitting the product was broken. Adrian tapped the table with one finger. What do you recommend, Evan? Evan looked at Claire's printed plan. Then he said, we keep the February announcement. We break the rollout into phases. We call the first stage a controlled deployment. We emphasize partnership, not delay. Claire's eyes narrowed. That was her plan, minus the part about being honest regarding the launch date. Adrian nodded slowly. That sounds workable. Claire felt something tighten in her chest. I already proposed a phased rollout. Evan turned toward her. Right, but the framing matters. The engineering schedule matters more than the framing. Adrian exhaled. Claire, we understand the operational risk. Evan is trying to solve the business problem. Claire looked down the table at 9 executives, all of whom had called her privately during the past 6 months to complain about North Star. Not one of them spoke. That was when she first realized how invisible she had become. Not ignored, invisible. There was a difference. Ignored meant people heard you and chose not to respond. Invisible meant they heard your ideas only after someone else repeated them. The meeting ended with Adrian assigning Evan to lead the North Star recovery effort and asking Claire to support execution. At 10:17, Claire returned to her office, closed the door, and sat without moving. She had a view of the river from the 17th floor. Normally, she barely noticed it. That morning, the water looked gray and hard, pieces of ice drifting under the bridges. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel Cho, one of the engineering directors, appeared on the screen. He had been in the meeting. Sorry. Nothing else. Claire stared at the word for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and kept working. That was what Claire always did. She kept working. 3 weeks later, North Star's test environment crashed during a live demonstration. The failure was worse than Claire predicted. Forecasting data duplicated across 2 regional warehouses, creating false inventory levels for thousands of items. The error did not affect real shipments because Claire had insisted the demonstration remain isolated from production, but North Star's leadership was furious. Adrian called an emergency meeting. This time, nobody argued when Claire said the rollout needed to stop. Evan said very little. By the end of the meeting, Claire had been assigned full responsibility for rebuilding the recovery plan. No one mentioned that she had proposed the same plan 3 weeks earlier. For the next 2 months, Claire worked between 60 and 80 hours a week. She joined 5:00 a.m. calls with engineering teams overseas, spent lunches in conference rooms, and drove to North Star warehouses twice in snowstorms because the customer had lost faith in remote updates. She slept with her phone on the nightstand and learned to wake fully alert at the sound of the company ringtone. Her younger sister, Megan, began sending messages asking if Claire was still alive. Her mother stopped asking whether Claire would come for Sunday dinner because the answer was usually, I'll try. Claire's best friend from college, Rachel, invited her to a birthday weekend in Nashville. Claire bought the flight and canceled it the night before because North Star's data migration was delayed. Everyone told Claire she worked too much. Claire knew, but she also knew that hundreds of employees depended on Meridian staying healthy. She knew the company had taken a chance on her when she was 27 and struggling to recover from a failed graduate program, a broken engagement, and the death of her father. She knew the founder, Samuel Whitmore, had once told her, "Companies don't survive because leaders are brilliant. They survive because someone cares enough to notice what everyone else is pretending not to see." Claire had built her career around that sentence. By March, North Star's relationship with Meridian had stabilized. By April, the customer signed a 2-year extension. The extension was worth $32 million. Meridian celebrated. There was champagne in the cafeteria, a company-wide email, and a short video from Adrian thanking the entire North Star team for extraordinary execution under pressure. Claire's name was not mentioned. She told herself it didn't matter. Then, at the celebration, Adrian raised his glass and said, "And special recognition to Evan for keeping the relationship together when things were at their most difficult." People applauded. Claire stood near the back beside Daniel Cho, holding sparkling water. Daniel looked at her. She smiled as if nothing was wrong. That night, Claire went home to a condo that felt unusually quiet. She took off her shoes, left her laptop bag by the door, and stood in the kitchen staring at a plant her mother had given her. Half the leaves were brown. She could not remember the last time she had watered it. Her phone vibrated with messages from work. Claire turned it face down. Then she did something she had not done in years. She cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. She sat on the floor beside the kitchen island, pressed both hands over her face, and cried with the exhausted silence of someone who had spent too long proving she could handle everything. The next morning, she arrived at Meridian at 7:03 instead of 6:00. It felt rebellious. At 9:30, she was called to Adrian's office. "Close the door," he said. Claire sat across from him. Adrian had a printed document on his desk. For one hopeful second, Claire thought it might be a promotion letter. Instead, it was the new executive structure. Meridian was creating a chief growth office. Evan Ross would lead it. Sales, customer strategy, partnerships, and strategic operations would report into him. Claire looked at the chart. Her role had been moved beneath Evan's. She read it twice. "I'm reporting to Evan." Adrian folded his hands. "This structure gives us more speed. I've been reporting directly to you for 3 years. And you've done excellent work. So why am I being moved under someone who created the North Star crisis?" Adrian's expression hardened slightly. "That's not a useful way to frame it." "It's an accurate way." "Claire." "No, I'm asking seriously. I spent 2 months rebuilding that account after Evan ignored every operational warning. Now he gets promoted and I report to him. Evan brings commercial leadership. And what do I bring?" Adrian paused. That pause stayed with Claire longer than anything he said afterward. Finally, he replied, "You bring execution." Claire nodded slowly. Execution. The word felt like a cage. Adrian continued talking about organizational alignment, growth stages, leadership strengths, and enterprise maturity. Claire heard only fragments. "You bring execution." When the meeting ended, she walked back to her office and shut the door. At 12:40, Evan knocked and entered without waiting. "I wanted to talk about the new structure," he said. Claire looked at him from behind her desk. "Did you know?" He hesitated. "I knew discussions were happening." "Did you ask for my team?" "I asked for a structure that made sense." "For you?" "For the company." Claire laughed once. Evan's face changed. "I respect you, Claire." "No, you respect what I can fix for you." "That's unfair." "Is it?" He walked closer to the desk. "Look, you're phenomenal at what you do. Everyone knows that." Apparently everyone except the person making decisions. "Adrian values you. He just put me under the executive who nearly destroyed our largest account." Evan's jaw tightened. You need to stop saying that. Why? Because it makes the promotion story less clean. I didn't create the technical failures. You created promises the technology couldn't meet. That's sales. No, that's lying with a commission plan. For the first time, Evan lost his polished expression. You know what your problem is, he said quietly. You think being right is the same as being a leader. Claire stood. And you think being visible is the same as being valuable. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then Evan straightened his jacket. Monday morning, I want your operating plan for the new organization. Claire looked at him. He added, and Claire, I'd suggest you think carefully about how you want to show up in this next chapter. When he left, Claire remained standing. Her hands were shaking. At 4:15, she opened a blank document. At 4:16, she typed, Dear Adrian, please accept this letter as formal notice of my resignation from Meridian Dynamics, effective 2 weeks from today. She stopped. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. Claire had imagined quitting many times, usually in traffic, sometimes in airport terminals, once while sitting in a warehouse at 2:00 a.m. eating crackers from a vending machine while 3 executives slept at a hotel nearby. But imagining resignation was different from writing it. She deleted the sentence. Then she typed it again. At 6:30, the office emptied. At 7:10, snow began falling. At 7:45, Claire was still staring at the letter. She thought of her father. Thomas Bennett had spent 32 years working for the same manufacturing company in Indiana. When Claire was a child, he would leave before sunrise wearing steel-toed boots and return smelling faintly of machine oil and winter air. He believed loyalty mattered. He also believed loyalty had to move in both directions. Near the end of his life, when cancer had reduced his world to hospitals, home care, and careful routines, Claire once complained to him about being overlooked at Meridian. Her father had smiled weakly and asked, Did they forget your value, or did you forget it first? At the time, Claire had rolled her eyes. Now the memory felt like a hand on her shoulder. She printed the resignation letter. The next morning, she placed it on Adrian's desk. He read the first line, then looked up. What is this? My resignation. I can see that. Then I guess we're aligned. Adrian's face tightened. Sit down. Claire remained standing. Is this because of the restructure? It's because of the last 3 years. That's dramatic. No, dramatic was telling North Star we could launch software that wasn't ready. This is administrative. Adrian leaned back. For several seconds, he studied her with an expression Claire could not read. Then he said, You're making an emotional decision. Claire almost smiled. It was such a predictable sentence. Maybe. You're angry about reporting to Evan. I'm angry because you've made it clear what you think my work is worth. That's not true. You told me I bring execution. You do. I bring judgment. I bring strategy. I bring trust with the people who actually build the product. I bring relationships with customers who call me when your executives stop answering. I bring institutional knowledge no one bothered to document because everyone assumed I'd always be here to remember it. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Claire continued. I told you North Star was going to fail before it failed. You ignored me. I rebuilt the relationship. You thanked Evan. Then you promoted him and put me under him. Promotions are not rewards for one project. Exactly. A long silence followed. Adrian stood and walked toward the window. Where are you going? I don't know yet. You don't have another job. No. That surprised him. Claire saw it immediately. Then think about what you're doing, he said. You have stability here, history, influence. I have responsibility. You have a career. Claire looked at him. So did my father, for 32 years. The week after his funeral, his company sent my mother a form letter thanking her for returning his security badge. Adrian turned. Claire's voice remained calm. I'm not spending my life waiting for an institution to love me back. He said nothing. Claire placed her badge on his desk. You'll need that on your last day, he said. I have a temporary one from security. She turned toward the door. Claire. She stopped. Adrian's next words came more quietly. If you walk out over this, don't assume the door will still be open later. Claire looked over her shoulder. That's the first honest thing you've said to me today. Then she left. For the first few days after resigning, Claire felt lighter than she had in years. She slept 7 hours in one night and woke confused by the sunlight. She met Rachel for lunch on a weekday and did not check her phone every 5 minutes. She drove to her mother's house on Sunday and stayed until after dinner. Her mother, Joan, made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the lemon pie Claire loved as a child. At one point, Joan reached across the table and touched Claire's hand. You look tired, she said. I'm getting less tired. I heard you quit. Claire smiled. Megan told you. Megan tells me everything you don't. Claire laughed. Her mother studied her. Are you happy? I think so. That's not the same as yes. I'm relieved. That's not the same either. Claire looked down at her plate. Joan did not push. Instead, she said, your father would have been proud that you stood up for yourself. Claire swallowed. Then her mother added, but he would also tell you not to confuse leaving something painful with knowing where you're going. That sentence followed Claire home. Her final 2 weeks at Meridian became an exhausting parade of handover meetings. People who had barely spoken to her in months suddenly realized how much she knew. Where was the North Star escalation history? Claire had it. Who understood the old pricing exceptions for state hospital networks? Claire did. Why did the Phoenix warehouse configuration have a different data rule? Claire remembered. Which engineering manager could get the German team to prioritize a production bug after hours? Claire knew. At first, she answered everything. Then she began noticing something that unsettled her. The company was not preparing to replace her. It was preparing to distribute her work among people who already had full-time jobs. Daniel Cho inherited technical escalations. A customer success director inherited North Star governance. A finance manager inherited pricing reviews. Evan's chief of staff inherited strategic planning. Nobody inherited the invisible part, knowing how the pieces fit together. On Claire's last Thursday, Daniel stopped by her office. You can still change your mind, he said. Claire smiled. That sounds like something Adrian would send you to say. He didn't. Then it's worse. Daniel sat in the chair across from her. He was 51, soft-spoken, and one of the few executives Claire trusted completely. We're going to miss you, he said. You'll be fine. No, we'll survive, that's different. Claire looked at him. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Evan wants the North Star AI rollout accelerated again. Claire's smile disappeared. What? He thinks the stabilization period is too cautious. We agreed with North Star on 12 weeks. I know. It's in the signed recovery plan. I know. Claire felt anger rise. Then tell him no. Daniel gave her a tired look. You know how that conversation goes. Claire did. That was exactly why she was leaving. Her last day arrived on a cold Friday in April. Human Resources organized a farewell gathering in the cafeteria. There were cupcakes, a card signed by dozens of people, and a framed photograph of the Chicago skyline. Adrian did not attend. His assistant said he was on an investor call. Evan came for 11 minutes. He hugged Claire in front of everyone. Big things ahead, he said. Claire smiled for the room. At 5:20, she packed the last items from her office into a cardboard box. A coffee mug, 2 books, a photograph of her father, a small ceramic bird her mother had given her, the North Star Crisis Plan, printed and marked with notes, which she shredded because it contained confidential information. Then she took one final look at the office. For 9 years, Meridian had been the architecture around her life. She knew the sound of the elevators. She knew which conference rooms were always too cold. She knew that the vending machine on 16 sometimes gave 2 bags of pretzels. She knew where the sun hit the west windows in October. She knew the building better than she knew some of her friends' homes. Leaving felt like walking out of a marriage in which she had loved the house more than the person. In the lobby, the night guard who had watched her arrive before dawn hundreds of times stood and opened the security gate. Last one, he asked. Claire nodded. He looked genuinely sad. Who's going to beat me here in the mornings? Someone with healthier boundaries, hopefully. He laughed. Then he held out his hand. You did good work upstairs. Claire shook it. Thank you. Outside, the city was bright with late afternoon sun. Claire stood on the sidewalk, holding the cardboard box, and felt something unfamiliar. Not freedom. Not yet. Emptiness. She had expected leaving to feel like a movie scene. Instead, it felt like missing a step in the dark. For 2 weeks, Claire rested. Then she began applying for jobs. That was when the regret started. Not all at once. At first, it appeared as inconvenience. Her health insurance changed. Her stock options stopped vesting. Recruiters who had called aggressively while she was employed became slower once she was not. A company in Seattle interviewed her 6 times and hired an internal candidate. A healthcare technology firm told her she was overqualified for one role and not commercially oriented enough for another. A startup founder offered her a position with a grand title and half her previous salary. Claire had savings. She was not in danger. But the psychological shift was brutal. At Meridian, her calendar had been full before she woke up. Now there were mornings when nobody needed her. At first, that had felt peaceful. By the 3rd month, it felt like evidence. Evidence that she had overestimated herself. Evidence that Adrian had been right. Evidence that execution was all she had ever been. Claire began waking at 4:30 a.m. for no reason. She would stare at the ceiling and mentally calculate how many months she could remain unemployed without touching retirement savings. She refreshed job boards. She rewrote her resume. She changed Vice President of Operations Strategy to Enterprise Transformation Executive, then changed it back because it sounded ridiculous. She attended networking events where strangers asked, "So what are you working on now?" And she learned to answer, "I'm exploring the right next leadership opportunity," instead of, "I quit a job that consumed my life and now I'm terrified I made a mistake." Rachel noticed. "You're spiraling," she said one afternoon. They were walking along the lakefront. "I'm being realistic." "No, you're turning uncertainty into a moral judgment." Claire shoved her hands into her coat pockets. "I should have stayed until I had something else." Maybe." Claire looked at her sharply. Rachel shrugged. "You want me to lie?" "No." "Then yes, financially, strategically, maybe quitting without another offer wasn't ideal." Claire looked toward the water. Rachel continued. "But that doesn't mean leaving was wrong. It means the way you left had a cost." Claire exhaled. "That sounds like regret." "It can be regret." Claire stopped walking. Rachel turned. Claire said, "I think I made the biggest mistake of my career." Rachel's expression softened. "Do you want Meridian back?" Claire didn't answer. That was the question she was afraid to ask herself. A week later, the answer seemed to arrive on its own. Daniel called. Claire almost didn't pick up. She had avoided talking to former coworkers because every update from Meridian left her emotionally confused. But Daniel rarely called without a reason. "Hey," she said. "Are you somewhere private?" Claire sat up straighter. "I'm at home." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "North Star suspended the rollout." Claire closed her eyes. "What happened?" "Inventory forecasting, issue in production." Her stomach dropped. "They went to production." Devon pushed for it. "When?" "2 weeks ago." They weren't supposed to move past controlled pilot until August. "I know." "What kind of issue?" Daniel sighed. "Duplicate demand signals. It created false stock shortages in 2 regions. They caught most of it before shipments changed, but one hospital network had emergency orders triggered unnecessarily." Claire stood and began pacing. "Did anyone get hurt?" "No." She stopped. The relief was immediate and physical. "Thank God." "But North Star's furious. Their board is involved now." Claire sat again. "What does Adrian say?" "Officially, we're working collaboratively toward resolution." "And unofficially?" "He wants to know exactly how this happened." Claire gave a humorless laugh. "He knows exactly how it happened." "I know." A silence. Then Daniel said, "There's more." Claire waited. 2 other customers are delaying renewals because they heard about North Star. "How?" "Industry is small." "Of course." Daniel lowered his voice. "And 3 people on my team have resigned." Claire stared at the wall. "Why?" "Burnout, they've been covering part of your old workload." That landed harder than the North Star news. "Who?" Daniel told her. Claire knew all 3. One had a new baby. One had worked at Meridian for 7 years. One had once told Claire she hoped to become a leader like her. Claire pressed her fingertips to her forehead. "I'm sorry." "Don't." "I left you all with a mess." "You didn't create the mess." "But I knew what would happen." "So did I." Claire's throat tightened. "I should have stayed long enough to protect the team." Daniel's voice became firmer. "Claire, listen to me. You stayed for years protecting everyone. The problem is we built systems that depended on you continuing to do that forever." She said nothing. Daniel continued. "You leaving exposed the weakness, you didn't cause it." But after the call ended, Claire sat alone in her living room and felt the regret deepen. It was no longer about her resume. It was about people. For years, she had believed she was protecting Meridian by absorbing the impact of bad decisions. Now she wondered if she had only made those decisions easier to repeat. Her resignation had not taught the company to value her. It had simply removed a barrier between recklessness and consequence. 3 days later, Adrian called. Claire stared at his name on the screen until it almost stopped ringing. Then she answered. "Hello." "Claire." His voice sounded different. Not softer. More controlled. "Adrian. I assume you've heard about North Star." "Daniel called me." "I see." She almost asked whether Daniel was in trouble for that, then decided she no longer worked there. Adrian continued. "We're conducting a full review." "You should." "I'd like your help." Claire said nothing. "Not as an employee," he added, "as a consultant." She looked toward the window. The trees on her street were finally green. "What kind of help?" North Star has agreed to a 10-day remediation review before deciding whether to terminate the account. They asked specifically whether you would participate. Claire's heart moved strangely. They asked for me. And yes. Why? Adrian paused. You know why. Claire sat down. For months, she had imagined Adrian calling to admit he had been wrong. In her imagination, she was confident and cold. In reality, her hands were trembling. What exactly are you asking? I want you to lead the remediation assessment and customer recovery plan. And Evan. Another pause. He won't be involved. Claire leaned back. What happened? That's not relevant. It is if I'm walking into the same structure. Adrian exhaled. Evan has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Claire closed her eyes. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt tired. How much time do I have to decide? North Star expects an answer by tomorrow. Claire almost laughed. Of course they did. Send me the scope. I will. Adrian. And yes. If I do this, I report to the board review committee, not to you. A silence. Then that's unusual. So is asking a former executive you sidelined to rescue your largest account. His voice cooled. You don't need to make this personal. It already was. Another silence. Finally he said, I'll see what can be arranged. No, arrange it then send the scope. Claire ended the call. For 10 minutes she sat still. Then she called Rachel. Don't do it, Rachel said immediately. Claire blinked. I haven't even told you what happened. Your voice sounds like Meridian. Claire laughed despite herself. They want me to consult on North Star. Absolutely not. They asked for me. Of course they did. The building is on fire, and they remembered you know where the extinguishers are. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Claire paced the living room. I know the account, I know the people. If North Star leaves, Meridian could have layoffs. Rachel was silent. Claire continued. And Daniel's team is exhausted. So now you're responsible for everyone again. No. You sound like you are. Claire stopped. Rachel's voice softened. Do you want to go back? I don't know. That's the only question that matters. Claire looked at the framed picture of her father on a shelf. No, she said finally, I don't want to go back. Then don't confuse helping with returning. That night, Claire read Adrian's consulting scope. It offered her a generous daily rate, full access to operational systems, and a 10-day engagement. The reporting language said she would report jointly to Adrian and the board committee. Claire returned it with one edit. Remove Adrian. At 7:12 the next morning, he accepted. Claire returned to Meridian on Monday, wearing the same navy suit she had worn to deliver her resignation. She told herself the choice was not symbolic. It was. The security guard smiled when she entered. Knew you'd miss me. Don't get emotional. He handed her a visitor badge. On the 17th floor, conversation seemed to stop as she walked past. Some people smiled. Some looked surprised. One junior analyst actually whispered, "She's back," loud enough for Claire to hear. Her old office belonged to someone else now. That hurt more than she expected. Instead, she was given a conference room on 18. Daniel arrived first. He hugged her. You look annoyingly rested. You look terrible. Thank you. They sat. For the next 90 minutes, Daniel explained the failure. The story was worse than Claire had imagined. After she left, Evan reframed North Star's recovery plan as a growth acceleration opportunity. He persuaded Adrian that the customer's continued caution reflected fear rather than technical risk. The production launch was moved forward. Engineering objections were recorded but overruled. A data duplication defect that had appeared in testing was classified as low probability because it could not be reproduced consistently. Claire stared at the incident log. Who signed the risk exception? Daniel looked at her. She already knew. Adrian. Daniel nodded. Claire leaned back. That changed everything. Evan had pushed. Adrian had approved. At 10:00, Claire met North Star's leadership by video call. Their CEO, Lisa Warren, did not bother with pleasantries. Claire, I'm going to be direct. The only reason this review is happening is because you're in it. I understand. We trusted your recovery plan. I know. Then you left. The words struck harder than Claire expected. I did. Lisa's expression remained steady. Were you aware Meridian planned to accelerate the rollout? No. Would you have supported it? No. Then why should we trust Meridian now? Claire took a breath. Maybe you shouldn't. Several people on the call shifted. Claire continued. Trust isn't something I can ask you to provide because I came back for 10 days. We need to earn it with verifiable controls, independent validation, and consequences when risk decisions are overridden. Lisa studied her. That answer is better than what I've heard for 2 weeks. Claire nodded. We'll send a full incident reconstruction within 48 hours. Not a presentation. Not a presentation. Raw timeline, decision records, technical findings. And yes. And I want to know who approved production. Claire's pulse slowed. This was the line. The company would want her to protect leadership. The customer wanted truth. Claire remembered Adrian saying she brought execution. She looked directly at the camera. You'll get the decision record. After the call, Adrian was waiting outside the conference room. His expression told her he had been listening. You didn't need to imply executive fault before the review is complete. I didn't imply anything. Lisa asked who approved production. And I said she'll get the record. Adrian lowered his voice. You're here to stabilize the relationship. I'm here to determine what happened. We know what happened. Then why are we doing a review? His jaw tightened. For a moment, they stood in the corridor, facing each other like two people who had finally run out of polite language. Adrian said, You seem to be enjoying this. Claire stared at him. Enjoying what? Being proven right. The accusation stunned her. Then it made her angry. You think I wanted this? I think part of you believes your resignation predicted the collapse. My resignation didn't predict anything, the data did. You always have data. Because data doesn't care who gets promoted. Adrian looked away. Claire stepped closer. Do you know what I regret? He looked back. For months I regretted quitting. I thought maybe I was arrogant. Maybe I should have stayed quiet, reported to Evan, protected my title, waited for a better moment. But standing here, I realize that's not what I regret. What do you regret? I regret making you look better than your decisions. Adrian's face went still. For years, Claire continued, every time leadership created a problem, people like me repaired it before customers saw the full damage. We called that teamwork. We called it commitment. But all we really did was protect executives from consequences long enough for them to believe consequences didn't exist. You're crossing a line. No, I'm finally telling you where the line was. Claire walked away before he could respond. For the next 2 days, she worked harder than she had since leaving Meridian, but the work felt different. She was not trying to prove loyalty. She was trying to establish facts. She interviewed engineers, customer success managers, product owners, sales leaders, and compliance staff. She collected emails. She reconstructed meeting notes. She compared internal risk scores with what executives had presented to North Star. The evidence was clear. The production acceleration had happened despite 6 documented warnings. Evan had pushed aggressively, but he had not acted alone. Adrian approved the final exception because he wanted the rollout announced before Meridian's quarterly investor briefing. That detail changed the crisis from a technical mistake into a leadership failure. On Wednesday evening, Claire sat alone in the conference room, reviewing the timeline when someone knocked. It was Maya Patel, a 29-year-old product manager who had worked with Claire on North Star. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Maya sat across from her. She looked nervous. "I heard you're interviewing people." "I am. There's something I didn't include in the written review." Claire closed her laptop. "Okay." Maya took a breath. "The week before launch, Evan asked me to revise the risk summary." Claire felt cold. "Revise how?" "He said the red status would create unnecessary alarm." "What did he want?" "Yellow." "Did the risk actually change?" "No." "Did you change it?" Maya looked down. "Yes." Claire was quiet. Tears gathered in Maya's eyes. "I know I shouldn't have." "What happened?" "He told me everyone had already agreed. He said I was making myself look difficult. Then he said people at my level needed to learn when to stop being theoretical." Claire knew the tone. She had heard variations of it for years. "Did anyone else know?" "His chief of staff was there." "Do you have anything in writing?" Maya hesitated. Then she took out her phone. "He sent a message afterward." Claire read it. "Thanks for getting aligned. Need the risk summary to support the business decision, not undermine it." Claire looked up. Maya's voice shook. "Am I going to get fired?" "No." "You can't promise that." "You're right." Claire placed the phone down. "But I can promise I'll document exactly how the decision happened." Maya wiped her eyes. "I should have said no." "And yes." Maya looked hurt. Claire continued gently. "And the company should not require courage from junior employees to compensate for bad leadership." Maya started crying. Claire moved around the table and handed her tissues. For a moment, Claire saw herself 9 years earlier, eager, capable, afraid of being labeled difficult. She wondered how many times she had swallowed an objection because she wanted to survive long enough to change something later. Maybe regret was not one feeling. Maybe it was a collection of all the moments a person wished they had been braver sooner. The next morning, Claire submitted the preliminary report to the board committee. At noon, she was asked to attend an emergency meeting. Adrian was there. So were 3 board members, outside counsel, the head of human resources, and Meridian's founder, Samuel Whitmore. Claire had not seen Samuel in nearly 2 years. He was 73 now, thinner than she remembered, his silver hair almost white. He had retired from active leadership but remained chairman emeritus and a major shareholder. When Claire entered, he stood. "Claire." "Samuel." He shook her hand with both of his. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "So do I." Everyone sat. The lead board member, Patricia Klein, opened the meeting. "Claire, we've reviewed your preliminary findings. We want to focus on governance failures and the decision to accelerate production." Claire nodded. For the next 40 minutes, she walked them through the timeline. She did not dramatize. She did not editorialize. She did not need to. 6 warnings. 3 risk reviews. 2 technical objections. 1 executive exception. Adrian listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, Patricia turned to him. "Did you approve the exception?" "And yes." "Were you aware engineering classified the data duplication defect as unresolved?" "I was aware it had not been reproduced consistently." That is not the question. Adrian's face tightened. And yes, why approve production? He looked around the table. Because based on the information available, I believe the commercial risk of further delay exceeded the technical risk. Claire watched Samuel's expression change. Not shock. Disappointment. Patricia asked, was the upcoming investor briefing a factor? Adrian glanced at Claire. And yes. Silence filled the room. Samuel spoke for the first time. How much of a factor? Adrian did not answer immediately. Significant. Samuel leaned back. Claire looked down at her notes. She did not feel victory. She felt grief. This was the president she had wanted to respect. The man she had defended in rooms he never entered. The leader she had told employees to trust. And now she understood that some part of her regret after quitting had come from wanting Meridian to remain what she had believed it was. The board dismissed Claire while it continued executive discussion. In the hallway, Samuel caught up with her. Walk with me. They took the stairs down one floor because the elevators were busy. Samuel moved slowly. You've had a difficult year, he said. That's one way to describe it. I heard what happened before you left. Claire glanced at him. All of it. Enough. Why didn't you intervene? Samuel stopped on the landing. The question had escaped before Claire could soften it. He looked older in the fluorescent stairwell. Because I told myself retirement meant letting new leadership lead. And now I wonder whether I confused restraint with absence. Claire looked away. Samuel nodded toward the stairs. They continued. When your father died, he said, you came back to work too early. Claire was surprised. I barely remember that months. I do. You sat in a conference room at 7 in the morning, correcting a distribution model, because you said being useful was easier than being sad. Claire swallowed. Samuel continued. I should have sent you home. You tried. I should have insisted. At the bottom of the stairs, he stopped again. Claire, companies reward the people who carry weight by giving them more weight. Good leaders notice when that becomes exploitation. I did not always notice. She studied him. Why are you telling me this? Because I owe you an apology too. Claire's eyes burned. She had imagined apologies from Adrian. She had not expected one from Samuel. I built a culture that celebrated rescue, he said. We made heroes out of people who fixed emergencies. We should have built fewer emergencies. Claire smiled faintly. That would have been less exciting. Much less. The elevator doors opened nearby. Samuel looked at her. What will you do when this engagement ends? I don't know. Good. She raised an eyebrow. He smiled. Knowing exactly what comes next is overrated. It's how people end up repeating the same life with different furniture. For the first time in months, Claire laughed. The board placed Adrian on temporary leave that afternoon. Evan's employment was terminated the next day. Meridian did not announce details publicly. It released a statement saying leadership changes were being made as part of an operational review. Claire expected Adrian to call. He did not. North Star received the full incident timeline, including the executive approval record. Lisa Warren was furious. But she did not terminate the contract. Instead, North Star suspended expansion, required independent technical validation, and demanded new governance protections. It was a painful outcome. It was also survivable. On the final day of Claire's consulting engagement, she presented the remediation roadmap to the board committee. When she finished, Patricia thanked her. Then Samuel said, "There's one more item." Claire glanced at him. Patricia folded her hands. "The board would like to discuss your return to Meridian." Claire's stomach tightened. No. The answer came so quickly that several people smiled. Patricia said, "You haven't heard the role." "I don't need to." Chief Operating Officer. Claire stared at her. For years, she had wanted a role like that. Authority equal to responsibility. A seat at the highest table. Recognition that could not be erased from an email. 6 months earlier, she might have cried receiving the offer. Now she felt almost nothing. Samuel watched her carefully. Patricia continued. Direct reporting to the board during the leadership transition. Full authority over operations, product governance, customer delivery, and risk. Compensation above your previous package. Claire looked at the table. This was what she had wanted. Wasn't it? A promotion. Respect. Power. Proof. The old Claire would have said yes before the sentence ended. The unemployed Claire from 2 months ago would have said yes, because she was afraid no one else would offer something better. But the woman sitting there now understood something uncomfortable. Wanting to be valued by a place could become another form of dependence. "What happens to Adrian?" she asked. Patricia exchanged a glance with Samuel. "His future is under review." Claire nodded. "And if I say no?" "We continue the search." No pressure. No threat. Just a choice. Claire looked at Samuel. He did not nod. He did not encourage her. He simply waited. That respect made the decision harder. "I need 24 hours, she said. That evening, Claire drove to her mother's house. Joan was in the garden trimming herbs. "You look serious," her mother said. "I got offered COO." Joan nearly cut the wrong plant. "Of Meridian." "Yes." Her mother stared. "Is that good?" Claire laughed. "That's exactly the problem." They sat on the back porch. Claire explained the offer, the board changes, Adrian's leave, Evan's termination, North Star's conditions. Joan listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, she asked, "Do you want the job?" "I used to." "That's not what I asked." Claire looked toward the yard. "I want what the job means." "What does it mean?" "That they finally see me." Her mother nodded. "And what does the job itself mean?" Claire was quiet. "Long hours," she said, "rebuilding trust, layoff risk, angry customers, reorganizing teams, hiring new leaders, fixing culture, probably 18 months of chaos." "Do you want to do that?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. Joan smiled sadly. "There's your answer." "But what if this is the opportunity I earned?" "Maybe it is." "What if nothing like it comes again?" "Maybe nothing like it should." Claire looked at her mother. Joan leaned back in the porch chair. "Your father regretted things." Claire blinked. "Dad?" "Of course, he was a human being, not a plaque." Claire laughed. Joan continued. "He regretted working too many Saturdays when you and Megan were little. He regretted not starting the repair business his friend offered him. He regretted staying at the factory during the years he hated it." Claire had never heard this. "Why didn't he leave?" "Fear." That word landed quietly. "He had 2 daughters," Joan said. "A mortgage, health insurance. Parents who needed help. Staying was not cowardice, it was a choice with reasons. But he used to say something near the end." "What?" Joan looked at Claire. "Regret does not always mean you chose wrong. Sometimes it means the other choice had something valuable too." Claire felt her eyes fill. Her mother reached for her hand. "You can regret leaving Meridian and still be right to leave." Claire looked down. For months, she had treated regret like a verdict. Maybe it was only evidence that choices had costs. The next morning, Claire declined the COO role. Patricia looked surprised. Samuel did not. May I ask why? Patricia said. Claire nodded. I don't want to spend the next chapter of my life proving the last chapter should have treated me better. No one spoke. Claire continued. I'll finish the North Star transition. I'll provide recommendations. I'll help stabilize the teams for a limited period if needed, but I'm not returning as an employee. Patricia leaned back. That is disappointing. I understand. Samuel smiled slightly. It's also clear. After the meeting, Claire walked through Meridian one last time. This time, the building did not feel like a marriage. It felt like a place. A meaningful place. A place where she had learned, failed, succeeded, sacrificed, grown, and stayed too long. But still only a place. Near the elevator, Maya Patel approached her. I heard you're leaving again. I was never really back. Maya nodded. Can I ask you something? Sure. How did you know when it was time to quit? Claire almost laughed. I didn't. Maya looked disappointed. Claire smiled. I knew I was unhappy. I knew I had been disrespected. I knew staying would cost me something. But I didn't know leaving would be right. I just knew staying the same was no longer acceptable. Maya considered that. I'm thinking about leaving. Because of what happened. Partly. Claire nodded. Then don't leave just because you're angry. Maya waited. Leave because you know what you're protecting. My career. Maybe your health, your values, your family, your curiosity, your future. Whatever matters enough that you don't want this place to own all of it. Maya smiled. Are you always this intense? Only on visitor badges. They hugged. 3 weeks later, Claire received a call from Lisa Warren at North Star. She expected another question about the remediation plan. Instead, Lisa said, What are you doing now? Consulting a little. Do you want to do more? Claire laughed. That depends. North Star was creating an independent operations advisory group to help healthcare supply companies avoid technology rollout failures like the one Meridian had nearly caused. Lisa wanted Claire to lead it. Not as an employee. As a partner. Claire's first instinct was caution. Then curiosity. The work would involve strategy, governance, customer operations, technology risk, and leadership coaching. In other words, everything Claire had been doing at Meridian without the authority to define how it should be done. She accepted a 6-month engagement. 6 months became a year. Claire built a small advisory firm called Bennett Systems Group. She hated the name at first. Rachel insisted it sounded trustworthy. Her first office was a second bedroom in her condo. Her second office was a rented room above an architecture studio. By the 3rd year, Bennett Systems employed 14 people. Daniel joined as a part-time advisor after leaving Meridian. Maya became one of Claire's first full-time hires. They worked with hospitals, manufacturers, software companies, and distribution networks. Claire created one rule that every client had to accept before signing a contract. Bad news travels upward faster than good news. No executive was allowed to punish an employee for raising a documented operational risk. Some companies refused. Claire stopped wanting their business. One autumn afternoon, nearly 4 years after she left Meridian, Claire was invited to speak at a leadership conference in Boston. The panel was called The Cost of Ignoring Operational Truth. Rachel teased her for a week. That title is so aggressively you. Claire pretended to be offended. After the panel, as people gathered near the stage, Claire saw a familiar face waiting at the edge of the crowd. Adrian Cole. For a moment, neither moved. He looked older. Not dramatically. Just enough. His hair had more gray at the temples. He wore no company badge. Claire knew from industry news that he had resigned from Meridian after the board review. He spent a year advising private equity firms, then became CEO of a smaller software company in Colorado. He approached when the crowd thinned. Claire. Adrian. That was a good panel. Thank you. He smiled faintly. You were kinder to executives than I expected. I've matured. I'm terrified. They both laughed. The tension eased slightly. Then silence returned. Adrian looked toward the empty stage. I owe you an apology. Claire's chest tightened. Years ago, she had wanted those words more than anything. Now they felt strangely gentle. You don't have to. I do. She waited. I was wrong about you. Claire said nothing. I thought leadership was about speed, he continued. I thought people who slowed decisions were obstacles unless they could package concerns in a way that preserved momentum, and you were always telling me what would break. That was literally my job. I know. He looked down. I treated your accuracy like negativity because it made my choices harder. Claire felt something inside her release. Not pain. Pressure. Adrian continued. After you left, I told myself the company would adjust, that nobody was irreplaceable. Nobody is. No, but systems can still be dependent on people. We were dependent on you in ways I didn't understand because you made the dependence look like competence. Claire nodded slowly. That's true. He gave a small smile. You don't make apologies easy. I'm trying to improve. He became serious again. I also gave Evan credit for work I knew you were carrying. Claire looked at him. That part surprised her. You knew. Not all of it enough. Why? Adrian exhaled. Because Evan was easy to present. Investors understood him. Sales understood him. He made growth sound inevitable. You made growth sound conditional. It was conditional. I know that now. Claire folded her arms. And the restructure. I thought putting you under him would force the two of you to balance each other. You thought I would clean up after him. Adrian did not defend himself. And yes. Claire looked away. For years, she had imagined this conversation ending with triumph. Instead, she felt sad for both of them. For the company they might have built. For the trust they had wasted. For the version of Adrian who believed acknowledging dependence was weakness. For the version of Claire who believed being needed was the same as being respected. I regretted leaving, she said. Adrian looked surprised. For months. Why? Because I was scared, because jobs didn't appear immediately, because people I cared about suffered after I left, because part of me wanted Meridian to prove I had overreacted. Adrian listened. Claire continued. But eventually, I understood something. What? I didn't regret leaving. I regretted that leaving had become necessary. He looked at her for a long moment. Then nodded. That makes sense. A conference organizer called Claire's name from across the room. She turned. Adrian stepped back. I won't keep you. Claire hesitated. How's your company? He smiled. Smaller than Meridian. That wasn't the question. He laughed. Better. Good. I changed how we handle risk reviews. Claire raised an eyebrow. Did you? Bad news goes to the top. Claire stared at him. Then she smiled. You stole that. I learned from the best. They shook hands. This time, there was no anger in it. No need to win. As Claire walked away, she realized that some endings did not arrive with punishment. Sometimes the person who hurt you learned. Sometimes they did not. Sometimes you got the apology. Sometimes you had to build a life that no longer required one. Meridian survived. It never became the industry giant Adrian once predicted, but under new leadership it became steadier, more disciplined, less addicted to dramatic growth announcements. North Star remained a customer. Daniel eventually retired. Maya became a partner at Bennett Systems. Samuel Whitmore died at 81. At his memorial, Claire learned that he had kept a copy of her first North Star recovery plan in a folder labeled Lessons I Should Have Learned Earlier. Claire cried when she heard that. Years later, a young operations manager named Elena approached Claire after a workshop. Elena looked exhausted. "I think my company doesn't value me," she said. Claire smiled gently. "What makes you think that?" "I fix everything. I work weekends. I keep projects from falling apart, but when promotions happen, they choose people who present better." Claire felt a familiar ache. "What do you want to do?" "Quit." "Do you have another job?" "No." "Do you have savings?" "Some." "Do you know what you want next?" "Not really." Claire nodded. Elena looked embarrassed. "You think I should stay?" "I didn't say that." "Then what should I do?" Claire looked at the young woman and remembered sitting in her condo refreshing job boards at 4:30 in the morning, wondering whether one decision had destroyed her career. She remembered Adrian's office, her father's photograph, her mother's porch, the North Star call, the visitor badge, the COO offer, the conference years later. All the regret, all the freedom, all the cost. "Before you quit," Claire said, separate 3 questions. Elena waited. First, is the situation bad, or are you simply tired? Okay. Second, can the situation realistically change? Elena nodded. Third, if it never changes, what will staying cost you? The young woman became quiet. Claire continued. People love stories where someone quits a terrible job and immediately becomes successful. That happens sometimes, but often quitting is frightening. You may miss the paycheck, you may miss the title, you may miss people, you may doubt yourself, you may even regret leaving. Elena looked worried. Claire smiled. Regret is not always a sign to go back. What is it then? Sometimes it's just the price of choosing. Elena looked down. Claire added, and sometimes the right decision still hurts. That night, Claire returned to her hotel room and called her mother. Joan answered on the 4th ring. "How was the workshop?" "Good." "Did you save corporate America?" "Not today." "Tomorrow, then." Claire laughed. They talked about ordinary things. Megan's children. A neighbor's dog. A new bakery near Joan's house. When the call ended, Claire stood by the hotel window looking at the city. She thought again about the phrase that had haunted her after quitting Meridian. "I made a mistake." For months, she had repeated it as if her life were a courtroom and regret were evidence for the prosecution. Now she saw it differently. Yes, she had made mistakes. She quit without a plan. She tied too much of her identity to work. She stayed too long. She protected executives from consequences. She waited for appreciation instead of demanding structure. She confused being indispensable with being secure. She confused loyalty with endurance. But leaving was not the mistake. Leaving was the moment the other mistakes finally became visible. And visibility, Claire had learned, could be painful before it became useful. She picked up her phone and opened a note she had been keeping for years. The note was titled, "Things I Wish I Knew at 30. She added a new line. "You can regret the road you chose and still be grateful you did not remain where you were." Then she put the phone down. Outside, traffic moved through the city in ribbons of white and red light. People were going home. People were starting night shifts. People were quitting. People were staying. People were choosing between security and possibility, pride and peace, loyalty and self-respect. No choice came without cost. No life came without second guessing. The question was not whether a person could avoid regret. The question was whether they could learn enough from it to stop repeating the same pain. Claire turned off the lamp and stood for a moment in the dark. For the first time in years, she did not wonder whether Meridian regretted losing her. She no longer needed to know. She knew what she had gained. And that was finally enough. A year after that workshop, Bennett Systems celebrated its 5th anniversary in a renovated warehouse overlooking the river. Claire had resisted having a party. She disliked speeches about milestones because they often turned messy years into neat success stories. Maya ignored her and organized one anyway. The room filled with employees, former clients, friends, and families. Daniel arrived carrying a bottle of expensive whiskey. He insisted nobody was allowed to open without him. Rachel brought a framed copy of the first invoice Bennett Systems had ever sent. It was for 3 days of operational review work and had been formatted incorrectly because Claire had created it from a free online template at midnight. Joan stood near the windows talking to Maya about grandchildren, as if Maya had somehow become responsible for providing them. When it was time for Claire to speak, she stood beside a small table with no podium. "I was told I had to say something inspiring," she began. Rachel called from the crowd, "Try something new." Everyone laughed. Claire smiled. 5 years ago, there was no Bennett Systems. There was a laptop in my second bedroom, one client, and a woman pretending she wasn't checking her bank balance every morning. More laughter. But the truth is, I did not leave Meridian because I had a brilliant plan. I left because I had reached the point where staying required me to participate in a story about myself that I no longer believed. The room quieted. The story said I should be grateful to be needed, even when I wasn't respected. It said good employees absorb bad leadership. It said if I worked hard enough, someone with more authority would eventually notice and reward it. It said leaving without certainty was failure. Claire looked across the room at Maya, Daniel, Rachel, and her mother. Some of those ideas contained pieces of truth. Hard work matters, loyalty matters, patience matters, stability matters, but none of them matter enough to surrender your judgment. She paused. When I quit, I regretted it. I want to say that clearly because success stories often erase that part. I regretted the money I walked away from. I regretted the fear I caused myself. I regretted leaving friends in a difficult situation. I regretted not planning better. I regretted the fact that the company had become so much of my identity that leaving made me feel invisible. Claire felt Joan watching her. But regret was not the end of the story. It was information. It taught me what I valued. It taught me what I feared. It taught me which mistakes belonged to me and which did not. She lifted her glass. So, I don't want to celebrate quitting a company. I want to celebrate learning to make choices without requiring them to be painless. The room remained quiet for half a second. Then applause rose around her. Claire looked down, embarrassed by the emotion gathering in her throat. Afterward, while everyone ate and talked, Joan joined her by the window. "Your father would have liked that speech," she said. "He would have said it was too long. He would have said that too." Claire smiled. Joan slipped her arm through Claire's. "Do you ever wish you had taken the COO job?" Claire considered the question carefully. "Sometimes." Her mother looked surprised. Claire laughed. "See, regret. What do you imagine?" "I imagine fixing Meridian from the inside, maybe building something great there, maybe having an office with a ridiculous view, maybe making more money." "And do you wish you had that life?" "Some days." Joan nodded. Claire looked across the room at the company she had built. "But I don't wish I could trade." That was the distinction she had needed years to understand. There would always be another life visible through the window of the choice not made. In that life, she stayed. In another, she returned. In another, Adrian listened the first time and none of the crisis happened. In another, her father lived long enough to see everything that came after. A person could spend decades mourning imaginary versions of a life. Claire had done enough of that. She turned away from the window and rejoined the room. At the center of the gathering, Maya was telling a new employee the story of how Claire once refused a client because its CEO wanted risk reports edited before board meetings. She actually closed her laptop and walked out, Maya said. The employee stared at Claire, seriously. Claire shrugged. They paid the outstanding invoice eventually. Daniel raised his glass. That's the inspiring part. Everyone laughed again. Later, after the last guest left and the rented chairs were stacked, Claire remained alone for a few minutes. On a shelf near the entrance sat the small ceramic bird from her old Meridian office. She had almost thrown it away during a move. Instead, she kept it. Not because she missed the office. Because she did not want to hate the person she had been there. That woman had worked too much, apologized too often, and accepted too little credit. But she had also been loyal, capable, brave in quiet ways, and determined to protect people. Claire did not need to reject her former self to become someone new. She only needed to stop asking that former self to carry the future. She switched off the office lights. For a second, the river outside reflected the city exactly as it had years earlier from Meridian's 17th floor. The same water. The same bridges. A different window. Claire smiled at that. Then she locked the door and went home,